To the raw files of the unreleased new wave of British heavy metal documentary Rule Big Britannia. We filmed lots of that footage between I think 2011 and 2014 in Newcastle. This was also when this festival Brofest was new. And yeah, with the help of Jeff Cox, we visited even musicians at home. We went to the rehearsal room from some bands. So it's really interesting what we already had as footage. But in the end, we never released that. We never edited that documentary. It was a ton of material along with interviews we did at festivals with other bands that belong to the new wave of British heavy metal. So it's a little sad, and we decided to give you that for free now. It also fits to the recently released double LP essential new wave of British heavy metal, the best of Neat Records. It was released on Golden Core 6. I'm working for that company. And yeah, we did the CD last year, and now the double LP with printed inlay in a gatefold is out too. And I think why not going deeper into the history of Neat Records with original producer Keith Nichol. Yeah, he did Venom, he did Raven, he did so much stuff that we could have been talking for hours, but in the end we kept it, I think 20 minutes or so. We visited him in his studio, or in one of the studios he is working, and yeah, let's see what he has to tell. I'm pretty sure this footage is really unique.
You once produced some of the most important new wave of British heavy metal records of all time. So when did you start working in studios, and did you already start with rock music back then?
I was a rock guitar player, so I left school to conquer the world with a guitar, and I did some touring, did quite well, but things went wrong, and I didn't really like touring very much. I like being away all the time. And then I heard that the local studio, which I thought was just like a demo studio, had lost their engineer, and I thought, I like the look of all of that. It looks interesting. So I just put my coat on, went round and says, "Can I have a job?" And oddly enough, they said yes. So I didn't know what I was doing, and there was nobody to ask. Nowadays, you talk to somebody about mixing, they're doing it at home. Everybody's got Pro Tools or Cubase or Logic, but nobody had anything back then. So few friends had a 4-track cassette, hissy, horrible thing. But so I blagged my way in, and they said, "We'll give you a 6-month trial," and I lasted 20 years.
So the Impulse Studio was your first ever job. And I think the first bands weren't heavy metal at all that were recording there. Right?
The first 2 releases from Neat was a band called Motorway, and that was just a pop record, and a girl called Janie McKenzie, who was a pop singer. And before I became like the engineer house producer, I was a session guitar player as well. So I played on the second one. I played guitar on that thing. You just went in and just did, what you're asked to do. Yeah. So I didn't come along until after that. So that was Mickey Sweeney and Steve Thompson did those records. And it was Mickey who left, and I went round and blagged his job. So when I first started, it was the beginning of Neat proper. So I think the first thing I did was with Fist, if I remember rightly.
Name, rank and serial number?
No, the one after that.
Ah, okay. Yeah.
And the first one was a band who I can't even remember what they were called. They were from Nottingham, and they came up and they were awful. and I was worse. I was terrible. I didn't know what I was doing at all. And I realised after that session I had a lot to learn. You know.
So what was the studio about? Was it a big? How can you explain it? Because we can't go there right now and film it because it's over.
It was small. It was dirty. It was 16-track 2-inch Ampex, great huge tape recorder, huge thing. And whenever you recorded on it, it came back sounding completely different because we didn't have test tapes or anything. It wasn't lined up properly. So it was very rough and ready. I mean, all we had a desk. We had some nice microphones, but we had 2 compressors, a noise gate, and a spring reverb. And that was it. You had to try and make it sound good with that. That was all. But because it wasn't posh, you know, it wasn't really lovely and high tech and everything. I think that was good in a way because people didn't feel inhibited by the technology. They came in and they were relaxed, have a beer, play, you know, just enjoy it.
How much was live back in the days when bands recorded? Nowadays, you often start with the drums and then the guitars and the bass. I think it was a little different back then.
I don't think people realise, you know, people look at some of those albums and think, God, they sound rough. But I mean, I'd ask anybody to do better in the time that we were allowed. So the average album when I first started was 3 days. So the first day, there were long days, but the first day was backing tracks. So you were expected to get the drums, the bass and the basic guitar tracks all together. So that would take you to about 3 o'clock in the morning of the first day. Second day, back there bright and early, guitar overdubs until about tea time, and then get the vocals down after tea time. And the third day you mixed it.
And that's it.
And that was
a full
it.
album.
Yes.
So can you remember the guys like Venom or Raven, where they? It was also new to them, I think, being in the studio for the very first time, where they really rough people, youthful people with a lot of energy.
Yes,
you felt that?
You've summed it up basically. I think that's what it was all about. So even in those early days, there was this kind of discussion about how far do you take production? What is the role of production? I mean, I really just saw myself as being the bridge between the band and the technology. They'd go, we want to do this, and it was my job to find out how you could do that. You know, I wasn't like in charge and telling them what to do. You can't tell Venom what to do. You know what I mean? That's a silly thing to even think about. But I mean, on the other hand, don't get me wrong, they're really nice people. You know, I mean, you've seen a lot. You work with a lot of heavy metal people. You look at them, some of them are quite frightening, and they're some of the nicest people you'll ever meet.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Are there any bands you have produced, maybe just a 7-inch single? This was often a kind of test balloon for the record company, that you might now think, that's strange that they didn't make it any bigger.
It wasn't just metal. So we did a lot of things. I did a single with a girl called Irene Hume, who was in a band called Prelude, who had some quite big hits. And it got shelved, and I never understood why it never went out. But I think the biggest surprise really was Venom, because now you look back on it and it looks huge and you can see the significance of the band and everything. But if you look at it from the other direction, there were just some kids who could hardly play when I first met them. Nobody knew they were going to be huge, you know. I mean, hats off to Dave Wood, because I don't think I'd signed them on the first recordings. So a little bit in, when by the time you get the black metal, you can see there's something evolving and happening. But to have spotted it long before then, I think that's quite bright.
Well, it's a 4-track EP, double A-side. First side is Hammerhead, Shoot to Kill, reverse side Changeling, and Back to the Bullet.
They're probably selling twice as many records in Benelux and Germany than they do in the UK.
What is the sound of the song Black Metal in the beginning? Did you have a saw in the studio or something?
That was a nasty trick, because back then, of course, it was all vinyl. And what we did with it, we took a chainsaw and sawed into a sheet of aluminium. And the idea was to cut it on the outer scroll, so that if you're putting the needle down by hand, you would expect it to be silent, and you go, ah! As soon as you heard this terrible noise.
Yeah.
So that's what that was about.
Okay. And who did this Buried Alive? You remember the song?
The introduction.
The intro, yeah.
Yeah, we took about a ton of gravel into the studio. I put a Sennheiser 441 microphone in a cardboard box, and we buried it. So you think, like, how do you make the sound of someone being buried? Well, bury something. Seemed to be the logical conclusion. What's good? I love doing those little things, like the beginning of Welcome to Hell, when I had to cut all the church bells up with a razor blade so that the clock chimed 13 times. You know.
I didn't notice that. 13
yeah.
times.
Yeah.
So did you also come up with ideas like this for the bands when you read the lyrics or know what they were doing, what they were singing about?
I wouldn't make any claims like that. No, they were very inventive, very imaginative. Conrad, you know, Kronos, did a lot of research. He kept coming. You think, oh, he's going to run out soon, you know, these ideas. But no, he'd find another evil person he could write a song about or whatever. And the research was very, very thorough. And I think my role was to make it happen.
Yeah.
They'd come in and go, we want to do this, and they didn't know necessarily how to do that. And I thought that's where I earn my money.
Did the bands bring their own equipment, or was there
Yes.
studio equipment like drums that everybody was using? Or?
No, I had a snare drum. I had a lovely old brass snare drum that saved many an album. You know, we didn't. With 3 days, you haven't got time to mess about. If it's not sounding good, you got to do something quick. So I just had a drum that went, that'll fix it. But somebody liked it a great deal and stole it. So I didn't have that very long. We had a PV combo that's on Welcome to Hell. That's, you know, the spring reverb. If you hit a spring reverb, it makes that noise. Yeah. So we took the amp and we threw it out the wall, and that's the lightning and thundery noises in the storm at the beginning of that. It didn't last long.
You needed to be really creative.
Yeah.
Today you get an MP3 or somewhere on the internet with a noise sound like this.
It's no fun, is it? And anybody else can do that. I like originality. I'd rather do it myself.
Still today?
Yeah.
We talk about the really early days with all the rough bands, but after a while, when a band called Def Leppard was so successful with their polished sound, I think some of the bands that were rough before started that they wanted to have the same success, maybe in the USA. So, did you notice that the band wanted to sound more polished after a while?
Some did, and some wanted to do quite the opposite. But there's always ideas that come in. So I think one of the big albums for me was Kiss's Creatures of the Night. Love It Loud. Did you know that?
Yeah.
That's sort of the drums at the beginning of that.
Drum sound.
What a sound! So I mean, nobody'd heard anything like that, and we were told that it was recorded in an aircraft hangar. So I think it was. I'm not very good at this. I forget things. I think it was Possessed.
Oh, yeah.
We hired a Jacobean Mansion in Surrey,
Really?
which is that was the only big budget Neat album ever, I think. So we hired this place because it had a great big banqueting hall. So it was all stone and glass and wood. So we set the Abaddon's huge drum kit up in there, and I just had Neumanns everywhere. And there's no electronic reverb on that album. That's all capturing just the sounds of the rooms in this Jacobean Mansion. That was great to do. We had the whole place to ourselves. We hired the entire place, and we used the Manor Mobile and recorded it in the Manor Mobile. And the bar bill came to more than the recording of the album. That's good drinking.
So when you listen to the old recordings, would you think that there would be a possibility to make an album sound exactly like you did it back in 81 or 82 with the modern equipment today?
I don't see why not. I don't see why not. It should be fine.
Yeah. So a lot
You've
of
just got to
younger-
not do a lot of things that are happening all the time, and I don't even like a lot of it anyway. So I don't gate drums. I hate noise gates on drums. I can hear them work. I absolutely hate them. I don't like the compressed drums. I know these are the things that everybody does now. Just they don't even think about it. You know, if those plugins aren't there, they think somebody's not doing their job. But if you get a drummer who can hit really hard, why compress it? It's always going to be the same, isn't it? If you can't hit it any harder, it can't be any louder. As long as you keep that up, it isn't going to be any quieter. So, you know, it just sounds dynamic and aggressive. And I'd rather encourage a drummer to play like that than let them play loose and then use plugins to try and patch it up. Because if you don't hit a snare drum as hard all the time, it isn't just quieter, is it? If you hit a soft snare here, it hasn't got as much edge, it hasn't got as much cut. So even if you make them the same volume, they sound different. That one sounds good because it was hit hard. This one sounds awful because it wasn't. So you can't fix that.
No.
So you've got to, I think one of your big jobs is to be on top of the performance. Just really encouraging people to really play the hardest and the best.
So some of the drummers who maybe are not the best, maybe sound better than some of the technically great guys, I think. Or?
Can they? Can they? The hard thing about doing a job like I was doing was in the big days of Neat Records up to about 2010 or something. It was one album after another. It hardly stopped. It was very, very intense, and they're really long days. And when a band comes in and you push them and you push them, and they finish their album, they're exhausted and they go away and they lie down. I've got another album to do. And I was dying at the end. I was really, it was getting far too much. So I didn't just work for Neat, so I did a lot of work outside of Neat Records. I actually really like to work on as wide a range of music as possible because I love the ideas of fusion. So if you hear something like Mantis playing a little guitar piece and you go, well, if you bring this Celtic influence into there, you get this extra little spark. You show him a little thing, he goes, oh, that's nice, and you've just got a little new thing in there. So I've always done stuff like that. So actually Neat was tied to Rubber Records originally, which was a folk label before they did Neat. And while Neat went, there was also Floating World Records, which was a pop label, and Outburst, which was an alternative pop label, and there was Completely Different Records, which was for strange stuff. But the Toy Dolls, the Toy Dolls, they were on Completely. I did 4 albums with the Toy Dolls.
And this was
Loved working with Olga.
This
Great.
was all Dave Wood?
Well, I managed the studio. That was my other hat, So Neat Records was the big customer that kept the studio busy and me very busy. But all these other things happened at the same time as well.
Ah, okay. They were in the same building?
Yeah, same studio.
This is why the building was so huge as our photo, because of all the offices, I think.
Yeah. It was on 3 floors.
Yeah? Okay. Yeah, there's one story. We've been told the last 2 days pretty often that when Raven joined you in the studio, they were so crazy headbanging that you needed to tape the headphones to the heads. Is this true, or is it just a nice story?
I don't remember that. I'm not saying it's not true, but I don't remember it.
Yeah.
The only thing I remember about Raven really was Rob, the drummer. He was concerned that his drumming didn't sound as complex as it might. And so when he set his kit up, he put his toms all out of order. Instead of like small to large, he just mixed them all up. So that when he did that, it sounded like he was going all over the place. And that was his idea. I've been accused of saying that was my idea, and I have never claimed it was my idea. That was Rob. And Rob's an engineer now.
Yeah, in America.
In the States, he's doing very well for stuff, yeah.
So you teach young people about studio engineering and other stuff. Do you often find some heavy metal fans here, and then you tell that I was the one recording Venom, Raven, and stuff?
usually I don't stand at the front and say I've done this, I've done that. You know, I keep quite quiet about it. But they will always Google or go on the net and they go, the same Keith Nichol? You know, he did that. So it's quite fun at times. Occasionally I get them, they'll bring albums in with the autographs and things occasionally, you know. It's quite good fun.
And there was a video cassette called Metal City with a lot of with Avenger, Warfare and Venom. And I think Warfare once made a fake studio situation for one video clip, and I think you were in there.
Yes, I remember it well actually.
The rest just a bit more upfront guitar. Yeah? A little bit more guitar. No sweat. It's something like that?
Yeah? So you are a TV star.
Yeah, it was very Spinal Tap. It was great.
Yeah.
So I was supposed to, the guitarist was in the studio, and I was supposed to go, yeah, that's a take, Calvin. And because Paul Evo was sat next to me, and he's going, don't call him Calvin, call him Falcon. I'm going, I'm not calling him Falcon, he's called Calvin. You know? So it was very Spinal Tap. It was very, very funny.
I mean,
stop quantizing drums.
I'm a drummer, so you please me all the time.
Yeah. But, I mean, this feel, isn't there? You know, I mean, the basics of feel are, if you want it to be exciting, you push. You don't speed up, but you push. And if I haven't got Pro Tools open, but if we looked at the grid, you should see, you should just be over the line. But you shouldn't be increasingly over the line, just over the line. That'll give it tension, that'll give it excitement. If you want it to feel lazy, you play behind the beat. That's reggae. Right? But if you put it on the beat, that's robot. And that's got nothing to do with human beings, and it doesn't have feel.
That's
Great.
it.
Thank you very
for
much.
this. This was